Well, good morning. This seems rather strange, doesn't it? All these changed times with the COVID-19. But there's something quite comforting about me sitting in my living room, chatting to you, hopefully sitting in your living room on this Sunday morning. I want to thank you for the opportunity to share with you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Tomlinson and I lead Sutton Community Works, which is a charity putting faith into action, doing things like street pastors and school pastors, running the local food bank, where we've seen a fantastic increase during this COVID crisis. And also, we recently ran a winter shelter. We also put on prayer days across the borough for different churches as well to come together to pray. Well, I've been around the borough since 1998. I led a church on the St Helier estate called Carshalton Christian Fellowship, which then became St Helier Community Church. And back in those days, Simon Lee was the Methodist minister in Carshalton, so that goes back a good number of years. I wanted to speak this morning a bit about change. I know that you're going through changes, and I guess we're all going through incredible changes at the moment, aren't we, in the world? And I think there are different types of change. One type of change is where it's too much for us, and in psychological terms, they talk about this as being stressful life events. So if you lose your job, you lose a loved one, you have to move, you get too many stressful life events at the same time. And what happens is that overwhelms us and we become paralysed by the stress or even can't do very much at all in response to it. We shut down in response to that. And obviously we don't want to get to that place. And the second type of change that we have to deal with is change that needs to happen. And sometimes the church needs to close. Sometimes a relationship needs to end. Sometimes a job needs to come to a close. Or as we've seen in the United States recently with the George Floyd incident, certainly systemic racism, which for as long as I can remember we've been saying needs to end, still exists. And so that change does need to come. As Martin Luther King stated in the 60s, that he wanted to see that change coming. I have a dream. When we can all stand together equal, which we are, of course, in God's eyes. But sometimes change is something that we need to grapple with on a daily basis. And, we live in a fast-changing world, don't we, where everything's become massively global. I'm sure you've seen many changes in your life, more changes than I've seen. Technology seems to change all the time, and some people say that knowledge and technology almost doubles in its change every 18 months, probably less now. So we're in a situation where change is literally here to stay, and as somebody once said, there's nothing as constant as change, bizarrely. So how do we actually navigate change? How do we make sure that we can deal with the change? Well, I think one thing is change is often fueled by, or our perception of change is often fueled by the media. Sometimes we listen to the media and that can build fear and anxiety and insecurity. So maybe having a bit of a ration on the amount of news that we listen to, or certainly we need to filter the news and make sure that we don't get too much of that kind of negative stuff, even if it's true, coming into our lives. So there's a number of things that we can do as we think about change. One is that we hopefully over our lives have built skills of resilience. We've learned to adapt to change. Perhaps for many of us we realise that this too will pass, that most things that we've seen will indeed pass. And perhaps for some of us we do struggle with change, and perhaps for those of us who don't struggle with change as much, perhaps who become more resilient and more adaptable, we can reach out to those who will struggle with change. I want to look at what the Bible says briefly this morning about how we can respond to change. And I want to read from Isaiah chapter 33, verse 6, a well-known verse, which I'm sure you've heard many times. It says, "He will be the sure foundation for your times, a rich store of salvation and wisdom and knowledge, and the fear of the Lord is the key to this treasure." Well, those are wonderful verses, aren't they, from Isaiah? And just a few thoughts about them. First of all, he is the sure foundation for your time. So the sure foundation, if you want to be steady, you want to stand on a good foundation. If you want to build a house, you build it on a good foundation. So foundations are really important. They're the things that we build good, solid things on. So it talks about stability, solidity, and security. And for our times, well, I've said already that our times are drastically changing, aren't they? We seem to be changing all the time. There seems to be always things happening across the world because of the type of world that we're in. And so the Lord's saying here that he will be that stability, that solidity, that security for our times, whatever our times is. And our times at the moment are rapidly changing and fluid and dynamic and quite dramatic. And then it says in the same verse, it says, a rich store of salvation. A rich store of salvation. Those wonderful words, a rich and abundant store, a place where, a depository, a place a bit like a bank account where we just put our money in and it builds up. And this is like a rich store of salvation. Salvation meaning to salvage, to redeem, to save from, to save to. So the Lord's saying here that he is the sure foundation for our times, but a rich store of salvation. He can save us and deliver us. And so when we're feeling overwhelmed, when we're feeling like things are getting on top of us, things are too much, we can come to this verse and realise that we have a rich store of salvation in him. And that salvation, of course, is in Jesus. It says in Matthew 11:28, come unto me, all you who labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. So heavy burdens, and it's a bit like feeling overwhelmed as we are at the moment with all this change. Jesus could be saying, come to me, all you who are struggling with change, and I will give you rest. And then it says we have a rich store of salvation and wisdom and knowledge. Well, boy, we certainly need wisdom and knowledge, don't we? And one of the things we're told in the Bible is to pray for our government, because we are told to pray for them, pray for those in authority, that we might live quiet and peaceful lives. And as we listen to our government and to politicians, we honour them and respect the job they do. They do a really difficult job, but we also realise how much wisdom and knowledge that they need to do this. It seems to be an ever-changing dynamic scene for them, and a really difficult thing to do because they're constantly under the scrutiny, 24/7 news and the internet. So we do pray for those in authority, but we have somebody that can give us a rich store of wisdom and knowledge. As Jesus said in the New Testament, if you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men liberally and upbraids not, and it shall be given to him. So we need that wisdom, don't we? And one of the legacies that we could leave for our children, for our grandchildren, who, let's be honest, are in a really challenging and difficult world at the moment, is that sure foundation, that Jesus is the sure foundation, that he's the one that they can actually turn to. You know, we're all looking for happiness, aren't we? We're looking for that key to life. Quite often if you go into a bookshop, they'll have the formula for success, how to get rich, how to be happy, how to be content, all that kind of stuff, how to lose weight. Well, here in the final bit of this verse, it says the fear of the Lord is the key to this treasure. You know, if you want to have salvation, if you want to be delivered from feeling overwhelmed, if you want to be in a stable and secure place, if we want to have that wisdom and knowledge to know what to do in difficult situations, it says the fear of the Lord is the key to this treasure. That's the key to this treasure. So if you're going to write a book about the key, what is the key? Well, it's very simple. It's in this verse. The key is the fear of the Lord, to reverence the Lord, to trust in the Lord, to stay close to the Lord. And that's why Jesus said, come to me, all you who labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Learn of me. Take my teaching, take my yoke upon you, for I am lowly in spirit. So that's a wonderful promise. And Proverbs 23 verse 6, it says, acknowledge me in all your ways, and I will direct your paths. So my encouragement to us this morning, including myself, is that we recognise that we have a sure foundation in Jesus, that we can come to him, and he will give us rest when we're burdened. And as it says in Proverbs 23 verse 6, that as we acknowledge him in all our ways, he will direct our paths. So I pray that for you as you go through this season of change in your lives. And I pray that God would really bless you at this time. Thank you.